Hello everyone, welcome. Very early in this course, we learned how to use and conjugate regular verbs in the present tense in Spanish. You've also learned some irregular verbs in the present tense, such as ser and estar, and also the verb tener and venir. In this lesson, we are going to take a look at a new category of verbs, and these are called stem-changing verbs. So let's go back to the beginning. The first thing you learn how to do regarding verbs is to conjugate a regular verb in the present tense. We learn how to conjugate the verb hablar, which means to speak. When you learn how to change this verb into its various forms in the present tense, you learned a very simple process. So you start with what is called the infinitive. The infinitive is the form of the verb that hasn't been conjugated, and it ends in AR, ER, or IR. So the first thing you do is you remove the ending from the verb. In this case, it's the AR, so you learned how to remove that. And what you're left with is called the root or the stem. So in this lesson, we're going to learn about stem-changing verbs. So this stem here for regular verbs does not change. It's the same form in every case. So you learned that you take this stem and all you have to do is add the endings to get your different forms of the verb in the present tense. These endings are fixed. You just have to memorize them, and you attach that ending to the stem or the root. So if I want to say in Spanish, I speak, I would say hablo. You speak, hablas. He speaks, habla, and so forth and so on. So now we are going to take a look at what we call a stem-changing verb. So how do you find the stem of a stem-changing verb? Well, you do the same thing. You remove the AR, and what you're left with is the stem. Since this is a stem-changing verb, well, what's going to happen is the stem will be different for some of the forms. So we use this regular stem for a couple of the forms, not all of them. And which forms you use, well, that's just a matter of memorization. It's the nosotros and the vosotros forms that use the regular unchanged stem. So the other forms will use the stem that changes from an E to an IE. So this is the pattern we're learning. So there are some stem-changing verbs that have a pattern of E changing to IE. So the verb cerrar, to close, follows that pattern. So we're going to use the unchanged stem for the nosotros and the vosotros forms, and we are going to use the changed stem for the yo, tú, usted, él, ella, and the ustedes, ellos, ellas form. And again, native speakers just learn how to do this through practice, so that's what we're going to do in this lesson. So when it's all said and done, this is what you have for the conjugation of the verb in the present tense. The E changes to an IE, so the sound is different. Over here, the E sound is E, the IE sound is ye. So we have E, and ye. So we have cierro, which means I close, I do close, or I am closing. Remember, each form has three meanings. Cierras, you close, you do close, you are closing. Cierra, cierra will mean he closes, she closes, or you close, the formal you. Cerramos, we close, we do close, we are closing. Cerráis, this is the vosotros form, the plural you that's used in Spain. So you close, you do close, you are closing. And then finally, cierran. Ustedes cierran, you close, remember that's the plural you. You close, you do close, you are closing. Or ellos or ellas cierran, they close, they do close, they are closing. What it all boils down to is you basically have to memorize this conjugation in the present tense for the verb cerrar, and for other verbs that are like this, that follow the same pattern. So again, remember, native speakers basically learn through practice, so that's what we're going to do. Before we practice, let me just remind you that, again, each form can have three possible meanings. Yo cierro, can mean I close, I do close, or I am closing, simply depending on the context in which you use it. Tú cierras, you close, you do close, you are closing. Él cierra, he closes, he does close, he is closing. And so forth and so on. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at this information that I have here. So I have cierro, which means I close, I do close, I am closing. Ella cierra, she closes, she does close, she is closing. Cerramos, we close, we do close, we are closing. And then I have some vocabulary here that is commonly used with the verb cerrar. For example, la puerta, the door. La ventana, the window. El libro, the book. El grifo, the faucet. And los ojos, the eyes or one's eyes. So let's go ahead and put this together. We have our conjugated verb and our nouns here. If I want to say I close the door, I would say in Spanish, cierro la puerta. If you want to say as well, I do close the door, this is what we call the emphatic do, then it's actually the same form, cierro la puerta. In addition, if you want to say I am closing the door, as in right now, you can also say cierro la puerta. Remember, one form can mean three different things in the present tense. I close the window, I do close the window, I am closing the window, cierro la ventana. I close the book, cierro el libro. I close the faucet, cierro el grifo. I close my eyes, cierro los ojos. Keep in mind that cierro los ojos literally is I close the eyes. In Spanish, if you want to say I close my eyes, it's not necessary to use a possessive adjective. You can just simply say cierro los ojos. Because you're the subject, it's understood in Spanish that they are your eyes that you're closing, so you don't have to use a possessive adjective. You don't have to say, in other words, cierro mis ojos. It's enough to just say cierro los ojos and I close my eyes is understood. Okay, a couple more examples here. If I want to say she closes the door, ella cierra la puerta. She closes the window. Ella cierra la ventana. She closes the book. Ella cierra el libro. She closes the faucet. Ella cierra el grifo. She closes her eyes. Ella cierra los ojos. We close the door. Cerramos la puerta. We close the window. Cerramos la ventana. We close the book. Cerramos el libro. We close the faucet. Cerramos el grifo. We close our eyes. Cerramos los ojos. All right, well, that's it for the verb cerrar in the present tense. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, I would appreciate it very much if you'd give it a like. To continue with this course and go on to the next lesson, click on the video that appears here on your screen. See you soon. Hasta pronto.